Critical comments about our child will naturally trigger painful emotions that often lead a bio parent to become defensive, protective, or to disengage altogether. And then, of course, we're no longer able to communicate in a collaborative way because we're stuck in the painful emotions and possibly feeling judged, embarrassed, offended, misunderstood, attacked, overwhelmed, or inadequate. When a bio parent becomes emotionally dysregulated like this, it's impossible to continue with effective, productive dialogue. You just can't.
And it took me a while to realize this. Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting, and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hey there, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. We can't tell you how much we're grateful to serve you with the content here on the show. You know, we've faced so many challenges as a blended family, and along the way, we've been blessed by incredible mentors and teachers, and that's what we hope that we get to be for you now. You know, at the core, we want to help you cultivate hope for your family's future and equip you with practical tools and strategies to help you to move from confusion to confidence. And chances are, you have others in your life who need all of that too. So we're wondering if you might be willing to share us with those that you care about. Maybe today you'll text a link to the show over to a friend or a family member or a coworker. Or maybe you'll share your favorite episode out on your social platforms. Either way, we just would love for you to share. And we want to thank you in advance for helping connect those around you with the resources that they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, how you choose to share this resource is uniquely up to you. But I really want to invite you, as you listen today, to take 20 seconds or so to share the show with someone you care about.
Yeah, that's right. Now, recently, one wife in our Blending Together community asked us this. When it comes to blending, what's the biggest challenge couples face?
Now, that's a pretty broad and general question.
Threw it out there.
But it only took like 2 seconds for both you and I, honey, to blurt out pretty much the same answer to her question. The biggest challenge blending couples tend to face, as far as what we've experienced, is building their parenting partnership.
Absolutely. Building a parenting partnership is definitely one of the most challenging feats for any blended couple. And we call it a feat because that's exactly what it is. Building a healthy, collaborative parenting partnership requires a set of skills that takes intentional effort and ongoing practice to master. This isn't something that just magically happens when a couple merges their families. It really is an amazing feat when you finally get there. One of the necessary skills in building your parenting partnership is the capacity to initiate and engage in conversations about each other's kids.
That's a tough one.
It is. And these conversations aren't easy because they often stir up emotions for both partners, and it feels a bit sensitive.
So sensitive and uncomfortable, in fact, that some couples avoid these conversations as much as possible. Sometimes because they're conflict avoidant and they just kind of want to keep the peace. And sometimes because they aren't sure how to have these kinds of conversations. They're kind of worried they might hurt their partner's feelings, or they're fearful about what their spouse might think of them. Or if they bring things up like irresponsibility, undesired behaviors, double standards, disrespect, anything about that child that's concerning, that it's just not going to go well. Right? Yeah.
But we've learned the hard way over the years that avoiding these conversations will work against your parenting partnership. Instead of building a healthy collaborative parenting partnership, Avoidance is actually breaking it down. Eventually, for most couples, any conversations that do come up will quickly escalate, and sadly, many blended couples who haven't learned the skills they need to build their parenting partnership, they'll end up living like two separate biological families under the same roof, burdened by unresolved issues, distrust, and resentment. And we don't want that for you,
Right.
which is why we're sharing a simple 4-part framework that you can start using today to grow your communication skills and build a healthy collaborative parenting partnership. We want that for you.
Absolutely. Let's hop right into it, okay? So the first part of the 4-part framework is to move away from pressure and wait to ask permission. This one is all about mindfully timing a sensitive conversation about your partner's child.
Right.
So we may have shared this story on the show before, but years ago when Annika was just a little thing, she was about 5 or 6 years old.
Shortly after we were married.
Yep. We were in our original little house. We didn't have a dishwasher. I remember standing at the sink, washing dishes by hand. I think I was washing and you might have been drying. And I remember you asking, honey, just one simple question of Annika. Hey, Annika, will you help us clear the table?
Right.
And what did she do?
No. And she kind of stomped out of the room and went and did her own thing.
Yeah.
Basically ignored me.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I found it really disrespectful and I felt like it was a real problem. Well, I didn't want to get after Annika right there in the moment. I also didn't want to quote unquote get after you for not really responding to her in that moment because you were kind of frozen. You didn't really respond to her in that moment.
It was a tough parenting moment.
It was a really tough parenting moment. And so all you bio parents out there in the room, I want you to put yourself in Kim's shoes. You're standing right next to me. You're drying the dishes. Your child was just disrespectful. And I lean over and I whisper right in your ear, are you going to do something about that? Well, let me tell you, that was a pretty rough moment for us.
Yeah, that did not go over well. See, when I'm facing a tough parenting moment like that, and I know that my child isn't responding the way I'd like her to, the last thing I need is to feel judged or pressured. That just is not helpful at all.
So that was a judgmental, pressuring moment for you?
It really was, because I'm already stressed out and struggling.
Yep.
And in that moment, your comment drove a negative story in my head, which was, you think I'm a bad parent and that my kid is an irresponsible brat.
Wow.
And that just adds to my stress and makes me want to lash out at you.
Sure.
In fact, at one point, I think I told you, butt out.
You think you told me.
Yeah. Just let me parent my own kid. And I started rejecting your input because you were sharing it at a time and in a way that I just couldn't hear it or accept it.
Right.
A parent under pressure won't react well to more pressure from their partner.
Right.
That just makes things worse.
Yeah. If you think about it, that's kind of a principle of life. You know, those who are already stressed and struggling under pressure will struggle even more when more pressure is applied.
Exactly.
Right? Now, I'm pretty thick-headed sometimes, but eventually I learned that I don't need to jump in with opinions or parenting advice right in the moment. Unless there's impending danger or something destructive that's actually happening in the moment, I can just keep my mouth shut while Kim does whatever she's going to do in the moment, knowing that I can initiate a conversation later about my concerns at a time when Kim might be able to engage a little bit better. Now, this was one of the first things that helped build our parenting partnership, is moving away from the pressure and being really mindful about the timing of a sensitive conversation.
Yeah. And honey, as you learn to move away from pressure, I was eventually able to listen and onboard your perspective about Annika's behavior. And what really helped me to do that was when you waited until things calmed down, until that tough parenting moment had passed. And then you asked for permission to talk about what happened. This was a game changer for us. So describe how that sounds, honey.
Sure. Yeah. I just started waiting until we were beyond the moment and both of us were calm. And then I would say some version of, Honey, I'd really like to talk about what happened with Annika last night, and I'm wondering when would be a good time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So by asking for an agreement on a good time to talk, I was essentially asking permission to engage in a sensitive conversation.
Right.
And guess what? Research shows that when someone is asked permission and then they actually grant that permission to have the dialogue, it opens up receptors in the brain, and that sets the stage for openness and a much healthier engagement.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised by that research. When I feel bulldozed into a heated discussion about things that need to be addressed with my child's inappropriate behavior, guess what? I want to shut down and shut you out.
Call me a bulldozer.
Yeah. But when the timing is right and I'm casually asked when's a good time to talk about something that happened, I'm much more open to engaging and less apt to become defensive or protective.
Right.
When you began approaching me like that, I had a sense of agency, and it felt more like a partnership, which made it a bit easier to engage in our sensitive conversations. And that gave me the opportunity to mentally and emotionally prepare for that conversation.
Yeah.
I really need that. I don't know if anyone else does, but I need that.
You might be the only one, honey. I don't know.
So bio parents, don't avoid these conversations by saying that you're not ready and, by just pushing the discussion out further and further, because in the long run, that will not lead to good things in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Give your permission by choosing a reasonable time to talk and make sure you show up emotionally regulated, well rested, and with a full belly.
Good idea.
Don't be
Yeah,
hangry.
that's right. Yep.
Be willing to openly engage in a sensitive conversation. This is worthy work because it'll help you build a healthy, collaborative parenting partnership, which is necessary. It's critical.
I love how you say a reasonable time to talk as well, because, as you got better and better at this, you actually got, your yes was sooner and sooner. Like you were able to engage with me quicker and quicker the more we practiced this.
Yeah. All of this takes practice,
Absolutely.
by the way.
Yeah. Now, step parents, I know this can be really tough. I remember feeling such a sense of urgency over getting Annika's behavior in line with our values and our house rules, like right now. I mean, this kid needed to learn respect and responsibility and self-sufficiency, and time was running out. I mean, she was 6 years old already, right? Like, come on. We've only got like 12 years left, right? Look, the reality is it's a really rare moment where the behavior of a child requires such immediate action that you can't wait a few hours or even a couple of days to have this discussion. So slow it down a bit, right? And yes, if you had met me 22 years ago, you would not believe this was coming out of my mouth right now.
I hardly believe it.
I know.
Except now you have 2 kids of your own, so you
I
get it
know,
more.
that's true. Yeah. But we've practiced this.
We have.
We practiced moving away from pressure, and I started asking for permission to talk. And they say timing is everything. As a step parent, it was hard for me to practice holding my tongue and patiently postponing a conversation to get past the stressful moment. And I had to learn to tolerate and manage my own discomfort and distress, which is a skill that you need to work on as well if you really want to master this first step of relieving the pressure from these conversations. Back in episode 187, we referred to this as basics for blending, how to tolerate and manage discomfort and distress. There's a link in the show notes for you to check out if you really want to. Yes. Okay. So that's part 1, right? We're going to slow things down. We're going to remove the pressure. And we're going to ask permission. Let's talk about part 2 of the framework, honey.
Great. Part 2 is to move from critical comments to objective observations. This one is all about how to enter into a sensitive conversation with your partner. We love the book Crucial Conversations by the group at Vital Smarts.
Yep.
It's so good, and it talks about the first 30 seconds of any conversation. They call it the hazardous half minute. It's hazardous because what happens in that first 30 seconds sets the tone and trajectory for the entire conversation.
That's right.
Here are a few examples of how not to begin a sensitive conversation about your partner's child. It's so annoying and frustrating when your child leaves dirty dishes all around the house, or uses their cell phone at the dinner table, or forgets about doing chores, and fill in the blank, whatever that might be.
Yep.
Your child is so irresponsible, rude, disrespectful, entitled, hard to be around, fill in the blank. You need to teach your child to treat others with respect, pull their weight and help out more, take responsibility for their poor behavior, accept a no without throwing a fit, fill in the blank.
So those are not good?
No, these are all critical comments that will most likely be received as self-serving motives or harsh judgment or negative labeling by your partner.
Right.
Here are a few other startup phrases to avoid. I won't put up with your child borrowing my child's stuff without asking. It's unacceptable that your child doesn't eat healthy foods.
Ooh.
It's not okay that you refuse to address the issue of disrespect when your child fails to acknowledge me.
Ugh.
Starting a conversation with critical, hardline declarations like these will inevitably send the trajectory of your conversation towards a battle. Instead of engaging in a productive conversation about the actual concern, now you'll be fighting about who's right and who's wrong.
Absolutely. You know, early on in our journey, I used a lot of critical comments when I was initiating a conversation about Annika's behavior. And it would completely hijack our conversations because, honey, you would just get emotionally triggered every time I brought something up.
Exactly. That's why they call it the hazardous half minute. Honey, when you approached me with critical comments, it created a very real hazard in my ability to continue the conversation from an open and rational mindset.
Sure, yeah.
These are sensitive conversations that can quickly become emotionally charged because our children, well, they're near and dear to our hearts.
Right.
And we're all doing our best as parents navigating challenging circumstances. So critical comments about our child will naturally trigger painful emotions that often lead a bio parent to become defensive, protective, or to disengage altogether. And then, of course, we're no longer able to communicate in a collaborative way because we're stuck in the painful emotions and possibly feeling judged, embarrassed, offended, misunderstood, attacked, overwhelmed, or inadequate. When a bio parent becomes emotionally dysregulated like this, it's impossible to continue with effective, productive dialogue. You just can't.
That's right. And it took me a while to realize this and then begin learning how to manage the hazardous half minute when I would initiate a sensitive conversation about Annika.
Right.
Eventually, I discovered starting with an objective observation based on facts. That was much more effective than making critical comments. It sounded a little bit something like this. Honey, I noticed last night when you asked Annika to help clear the table that she ignored you. I'm simply stating the fact of what happened without adding how I feel about it or what I think you need to do about it or about your parenting overall. I'm just sticking with an objective observation, and that's literally it.
Yeah. Listen to this definition of the word objective. Expressing or dealing with the facts or conditions as perceived without distortion by personal feelings, prejudices, or interpretations.
That's good.
An objective observation is much easier to onboard and consider than a critical comment.
Right.
Truly objective observations have a much lower risk of triggering painful emotions.
Exactly. I'm avoiding the hazards of those first 30 seconds while still addressing the issue. I'm very careful not to make critical hardline declarations or harsh judgments or add negative labeling that might be perceived as, I guess, kind of self-serving.
Yeah, that's how it's onboarded. So, honey, when you approached me in this way, it really began to be much easier for me to hang in there and engage with you in these sensitive conversations. However, some bio parents have a hair trigger when it comes to discussing sensitive issues around their children. And they might still move towards a defensive, a protective, or disengaged posture when their partner makes an objective observation.
Sure, yeah.
Now, if that's you, it may be that you've been hurt in the past by these kinds of sensitive conversations, or that you've dug in your heels and you aren't willing to build partnership around parenting. Whatever the reason, I encourage you to explore this and do what you need to do to move beyond the barriers. If a bio parent isn't able to hear the perspective of the step parent and engage in open conversation around their observations and concerns, the end result will not be good for your couple relationship. You'll end up robbing yourselves of the connection and collaboration you really want with each other. Now, if you're listening and you just realized, oh, that's me, and I'm feeling really stuck. Maybe you're not sure how to move beyond these tough emotions and engage in a conversation when this pops up. Please, we just really encourage you to reach out to us and schedule a free coaching call, because we're happy to help you get unstuck as a couple and move towards a healthy collaborative partnership around parenting all the kids in your home. I mean, if we can do it, you can do it too. And we're here to show you the way.
I agree.
Okay, honey. So you've moved away from critical comments and towards an objective observation. What's next?
Well, part 3 is to share positive possibilities. So this is about sharing our hopes for our partner's child. Now, we're not sharing that our hope is for them to stop borrowing stuff without asking or immediately begin eating healthy food at every single meal, right? We want to move away from focusing on the specific behaviors that we're frustrated with today and instead share the positive possibilities that we're genuinely hoping for the child's future.
Say that again.
So we're going to move away from the specific behaviors that we're frustrated with today and instead share the positive possibilities that we genuinely hope for the child's future. That means that when you're sharing your hopes, those positive possibilities, you want to focus on values, character traits, and life skills, those things that are most important for the child's future as an adult, and honestly, for everyone in your family as well.
I love that. Okay. So you've asked for permission to have the conversation. You've started by objectively sharing your observations. And so now, honey, share how you will share positive possibilities. What does that sound like?
Okay. So I like to start sharing by using the phrase, my hope. And it might sound like this. My hope for Annika is that she's going to grow into a young woman who is respectful, self-sufficient, and responsible, and that she'll have a desire to contribute to her household.
So what I really appreciate about that is that you're sharing a future vision for Annika and her development without getting hung up on what she's doing that's wrong or inappropriate or unacceptable. And you aren't pointing out my feelings as a parent or telling me what I need to fix in my daughter.
Right.
And this approach really helps me to trust your motives, helps to bring the walls down.
Right.
Because I'm reminded that you want good things for me and for my child, and that ultimately you really do want good things for Annika's future.
Absolutely. That kind of approach helps remind us both that our goal in parenting is not just about compliance, but more importantly about character. And one area we can both agree on is that we want all of our kids to grow up with strong character.
Of course.
Yeah. So once we ask permission, we focus on those objective observations and we share these positive possibilities. Then the final part of the framework is to pursue partnership. And true partnership requires things like mutual respect and open dialogue and understanding. And to get there, each of us as individuals must genuinely learn and practice one specific skill. I'd say this is likely the most critical skill to develop. And that skill is listening. Now, I know. You're thinking, yeah, Mike, I've heard all about that before. How we're supposed to listen to understand, not to respond. I tried that a few times and it just didn't work. Or, you don't understand, Mike. My spouse never listens to me. Sometimes what we really mean is that my spouse didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
So that means that they didn't listen to me.
Right?
I got to tell you, that's just faulty thinking.
Yeah.
It's stinking thinking. See, it's normal for each of you to have very different perspectives around parenting.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get hung up on what we call perspective pushing, which means you're over-explaining yourself or you're desperately trying to get your partner to adopt your perspective pushing just leads to frustration and tons of big emotions. And then partnership feels impossible.
Yeah.
But as Les and Leslie Parrott say, the goal is not to think alike. The goal is to think together. The reality is you both have a need to be heard and you each believe your perspective is valid. And most often, both perspectives are valid, and yet they're different.
Yeah.
Perspective pushing doesn't change much. It keeps couples stuck in unproductive cycles of disagreement. But real partnership requires each individual person, bio parent and step parent, to listen and acknowledge the other person's perspective, even when they don't agree with it. And guess what? It's your job to practice listening, even when you feel unheard and when it seems like your spouse is totally not listening to you. In fact, I might suggest that it's even more important for you to focus on listening with curiosity in the moments when you feel the most unheard.
Yeah.
Now, that's really hard to do if you're feeling emotionally dysregulated. Nevertheless, it's your job as an individual to get regulated and focus on listening. So if you're waiting around for your partner to make the first move, or worse, you're waiting around until you feel like doing it, then you're not actually pursuing partnership.
No.
You're postponing partnership.
Exactly.
You've got to be willing to practice what will build partnership even in those moments when your partner isn't partnering very well.
Yeah. And when we talk about truly listening, we mean active listening, which is a skill that requires the listener to be present in the moment and refrain from case building or pushing their own perspective. And instead to focus on what their partner is actually sharing, to actually listen.
Yep.
And then when your partner is finished sharing their own thoughts, concerns, and struggles, you can simply repeat back exactly what you just heard so that your partner feels heard. It's not complicated, but it does take some intentional practice.
That's right. And you might even try validating your partner, remembering that you can offer empathy and validation without necessarily agreeing.
You can.
And this can really help to build trust and unity. A simple statement like, I can see why this is really hard for you, or it makes sense why this is so important to you. Both of those are validating without necessarily agreeing. Now, if you want to practice this, then when you realize it's time for you to pursue partnership, start with a simple open-ended question. Here's what it might sound like. I'm wondering what thoughts or concerns you might have. And then focus on putting your listening skills to work.
Right. Okay. So before we move on, can you go ahead and put all 4 parts together for us, honey?
Sure. Yeah. Let's just stick with the example of Annika's behavior early on in our marriage that we've been talking about. So I start by patiently watching for a calm moment to ask you permission. And then I say something like, honey, I'd like to talk about what happened with Annika last night, and I'm wondering when would be a good time to do that. Now, you might agree to discuss it right then or ask to schedule a later time. Either way, when it's time to talk, I'm going to start with my objective observation. You know, I noticed last night when you asked Annika to help clear the table that she ignored you. Okay, there's my objective observation. Then I'm going to go on. My hope for Annika is that she will grow into a young woman who is respectful, self-sufficient, and responsible, and that she'll have a desire to contribute to her household. That's the positive possibility. And next, I'm going to pursue partnership by asking that open-ended question. I'm wondering what thoughts or concerns you might have about all that, honey. That's the framework for initiating the conversation and managing that hazardous half minute. I noticed, I hope, and I'm wondering. Then I'm just going to focus on listening to your response with curiosity And a primary goal is to simply understand your perspective.
Which would have been something like, yeah, I see what you're saying, and I want those things for Annika too, but I'm not sure how to handle it when she acts that way.
So what I hear you saying is that feels like a challenge or a problem, but you're feeling stuck in what to actually do when it's in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you feel heard when I just said that?
I did, yes.
Exactly.
Thank you.
23 years later, and you still feel heard, right?
Yeah.
Now, that response is radically different than you getting defensive and protective and telling me just to butt out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When you started to initiate sensitive conversations using this 4-part framework, that's when I became much more willing to partner with you around parenting. Because it felt like you were on my side and for me and for Annika, not against either of us.
Yeah.
This approach creates a safe place for sharing what's going on internally for the bio parent, which for me was some guilt, some fear, and some insecurity. But there can be all kinds of emotional and practical struggles a bio parent might be facing. When I could safely share my struggles with you and felt that you really heard and empathized with me, then and only then was I able to make changes in my parenting approach with Annika and in my partnering with you, honey.
That's right. Back then I didn't have any biological kids yet, so it wasn't easy for me to actually understand your internal struggles with all that and your perspectives around parenting.
Right.
But by actively listening and choosing to have empathy for you and for Annika, I was able to move away from pressuring in those stressful moments and making those critical comments even before you and I had our mutual kids. And instead, I started learning to ask for permission for the conversation, to share my objective observations and positive possibilities, and then pursue partnership with you by just listening to your response. The framework is simple. I noticed, I'm hoping, and I'm wondering, and then focus on listening and understanding. I really did want to bring value as a step parent. I wanted to be supportive, but until I learned this framework for navigating a sensitive conversation, I really wasn't bringing value or offering support. I was just kind of pushing you away and making things harder than they actually needed to be.
Yeah. Learning how to initiate the conversation is so important for a step parent, but the truth is, true partnership takes two. It's equally important for a bio parent to learn how to receive these objective observations and positive possibilities and honestly share their thoughts and concerns as well as their struggles around parenting without defensiveness or blame.
Yeah.
To fully engage in partnership and resist the urge to minimize or avoid their partner's observations and shut them out.
Absolutely. And we don't have to think the same,
right,
but we do have to learn to think together. That's what partnership is all about.
Yeah. If you're a bio parent who tends to become resistant to having these sensitive parenting conversations, and you might need some help with how to show up well and engage when your partner initiates a conversation about one of your kids, be sure that you catch our Simple Step bonus episode next week. I'll be sharing what I've learned over the years and what's helped me to build partnership with Mike around parenting my daughter and how much value that's brought to our family. This is not something you can afford to neglect in your relationship.
That's right.
You've got to pay attention to this.
Yeah, and if you're wondering how to access our biweekly Simple Steps, which are just short and sweet, they're really action-focused. They're kind of bonus content. All you have to do is subscribe to the Blended Family Breakthrough Show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of your listening apps, so that way you don't miss any of them.
So all of what we've talked about today is just about how to begin talking about each other's kids. But this is just the first step in building a healthy collaborative partnership around parenting. The next step is to get united around the values, character traits, and life skills you want to instill in your blended family. Those things that are important to each of you.
That's right. This is crucial if you really want your parenting partnership to thrive and for all the kids to gain what they'll need as they develop and move closer and closer toward adulthood each day. Remember, parenting is not about compliance. It's all about building character.
We recognized a while back just how critical it is for blended couples to get united around these things as they lead their family forward, which is why we've developed a process for doing just that. For years, we've been coaching couples with a focus on getting united and parenting all the kids from a place of shared values. This makes partnership and parenting so much easier for blended couples, believe us. And it leads to better outcomes for all the kids as well.
That's right. This is a step-by-step coaching program called Step Families That Make It, which couples complete in just 3 coaching sessions and a real minimal amount of homework. Engaging in this process builds partnership, skill, and alignment that honors each partner's perspective and gives practical tools for parenting and step parenting.
Yep, it's affordable, it's effective, and it helps couples break free from unproductive perspective pushing and ongoing conflict around parenting. So if you're ready to take a next step in building your parenting partnership, which in our opinion is at the top of the list of importance for blended couples, all you have to do is click the link in the show notes and schedule your free coaching call with us to get started.
Absolutely. We would be honored to help you, and we are excited to meet you as well. So in the meantime, we invite you to just enter into this framework. And remember, the way you're going to deliver it is simply, I noticed, I'm hoping, and I'm wondering. Try to practice that over the next couple of weeks. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.
Does it ever feel like people just don't get how tough it is to blend a family? What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blended family life. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple,
creating more connection as a family,
experiencing partnership in parenting,
and even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you'll get to connect with us and maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll gain access to a variety of resources like our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated, and quality support can sometimes be expensive and hard to find. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive regardless of their budget.
So scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes and click the link to join us in the Blending Together community and meet other couples just like you in our upcoming community meeting. Plus, when you join before the end of the month, you'll gain access to our brand new bonus mini course that will help you make quick headway. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. We can't wait to meet you inside Blending Together. Just click the link all the way at the bottom of the show notes to get started.
We'll see you there.